Hello. Recap writer here. Today, we're diving into Hacksaw Ridge, a gripping and inspiring war film released in 2016. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The movie begins with Tom Doss, a World War I veteran, and an alcoholic grieving over the loss of his comrades during World War I. The scene shifts to 1929 Lynchburg, Virginia, where we meet young Desmond Doss and his brother, Hal Doss. Growing up in a deeply religious Seventh-day Adventist family, Desmond is raised with a strict moral code, including a commitment to non-violence. This belief becomes a cornerstone of his life after a childhood incident where he almost kills his brother in a fight. The experience leaves him deeply traumatized, and he vows never to harm another person again. Tom's trauma and alcoholism create tension in the family. These early experiences shape Desmond's unwavering commitment to his faith and principles. Many years later, in a local church service, Desmond's commitment to his faith is highlighted as he grows up as a Seventh-day Adventist, believing in non-violence and observing Sabbath. Later that day, Desmond saves a man injured in a car accident, rushing him to the hospital and performing basic first aid along the way by making a tourniquet out of his belt, which stopped the profuse bleeding from the man's severed artery in the thighs. At the hospital, the doctor told Doss he has saved the man's life. This moment ignites his desire to help people, inspiring him to pursue a role in medicine. Later at the hospital, Desmond meets Dorothy Schutte, a nurse who later became his love. Their romance blossoms through tender and light-hearted moments, as Desmond's awkward but endearing attempts to impress her. Doss keeps going back to the hospital to meet Dorothy, and he eventually musters the courage to ask her out. They enter into a relationship, and Doss tells her of his desire to do medical work. He was inspired when the doctor told him that he saved the man's life, and Doss felt good about it. Dorothy's encouragement strengthens Desmond's resolve to serve as a medic. During the outbreak of World War II, Doss is motivated to enlist in the army, as Hal has already enlisted in the army, and argues that the army protects families back home, so it does not count as killing. Desmond announces his intention to enlist in the army as a combat medic, after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor brings the United States into war, much to the dismay of his father Tom, stating he had to help his comrades fight for freedom. Tom, who fears for his son's safety, resents the military for its role in his personal trauma. Despite Tom's objections, Desmond's conviction drives him forward. After explaining to Dorothy he needed to enlist in the army, he asked her to marry him, which she gladly accepts. The day for departure to the Fort Jackson barracks finally arrives, where Dorothy gifted him a copy of the Bible and her picture and asks him to keep it close to his heart. Desmond is placed in basic training with the 77th Infantry Division under the command of Sergeant Howell, which he excels physically. At Fort Jackson, South Carolina, Desmond faces immense challenges as he refuses to handle a rifle during training and does not attend trainings on Saturdays, citing his religious beliefs. This stance earns him the wrath of his commanding officers, Sergeant Howell and Captain Glover, as well as ridicule from his fellow trainees. Sergeant Howell and Captain Glover attempts to discharge Desmond for psychiatric reasons. They subsequently torment Desmond by putting him through immense labor to drive him out, including one night where he was beaten by his fellow soldiers. Despite physical and emotional abuse, Desmond's resolve remains unshaken. Desmond's unit completes basic training and is released on leave, during which Desmond intends to marry Dorothy. But his refusal to carry a firearm leads to his arrest by his company commander, Lieutenant Colonel Cooney. Later that day, Captain Glover and Dorothy visit Desmond in jail, trying to convince him to plead guilty so that he can be released without charge, but he refuses to compromise his beliefs. The tension culminates in Desmond being tried by the court-martial for disobeying orders to carry a weapon. During the trial, Desmond pleads not guilty, but before he is sentenced, his father, Tom Doss, intervenes by contacting a former military colleague, Brigadier General Musgrove, leading to Desmond's right to serve as a medic without compromising his beliefs. In May 1945, Desmond's unit is sent to the Pacific Theater, where they prepare to engage in the Battle of Okinawa. As Desmond and his comrades approach the island, they are overwhelmed by the horror and chaos of war. The soldiers experience a range of emotions, from fear and confusion to determination. After the soldiers land on the island, they are quickly thrust into the harsh realities of battle. They encounter an old, seemingly deserted house while making their way through the chaotic terrain. Desmond and a few of his fellow soldiers take shelter in the abandoned house, trying to avoid enemy fire and assess their surroundings. The soldiers, wary of their environment, cautiously move through the house, checking for any signs of enemy presence, knowing that the Japanese forces could be hiding anywhere. However, the tension is palpable as the soldiers are well aware that this moment of relative calm could quickly turn into danger. They are tasked with ascending and securing the Hacksaw Ridge. The Hacksaw Ridge is on top of a cliff, where the soldiers have to climb to fight. The naval batteries bombard the ridge before the soldiers start climbing. The battle begins with intense scenes where the unit ascends the ridge, only to face devastating Japanese resistance. The soldiers were enduring heavy losses, and amid the chaos, Desmond tirelessly tends to the wounded, earning the admiration of his peers, including his squadmate Smitty, after saving his life. Smitty apologizes for doubting his courage later that night, after spending the night with Doss in a foxhole. It is then revealed Desmond's dislike to holding a firearm stems from nearly shooting his drunken father, who threatened his mother with a gun some years ago. The next morning, the Japanese launch a massive counterattack and drive the Americans off the escarpment. Smitty is killed, and Howell and several of Desmond's comrades are left injured on the battlefield. Following the initial assault, many soldiers in Desmond Doss's unit have been either killed or severely wounded. The troops are disorganized and demoralized, overwhelmed by the intense and unrelenting enemy fire. As the situation becomes increasingly dire, Captain Glover orders a retreat, telling the remaining men to fall back and descend from the ridge to safety. In this chaotic moment, Captain Glover is clearly shaken by the loss of life and the devastation around him. He is visibly frustrated as the mission is a failure, and he is struggling with the reality of the situation. The soldiers are retreating under heavy fire, and Glover, like many of the officers, feels the weight of the dire circumstances they face. Captain Glover is called to the commanding officer, who is questioning the failure of the assault. The officer is angry and frustrated with the retreat, as the mission hasn't succeeded, and the soldiers have been overwhelmed. He tells Glover that the assault was a disaster, and that the soldiers who were left behind on the ridge are essentially lost. When the unit is ordered to retreat, Desmond remains behind on the battlefield. Over the course of a single night, he risks his life to rescue 75 injured soldiers, lowering them one by one down the ridge using a rope, driven by a constant prayer, "Lord, help me get one more." During the course of saving his comrades, he escapes death after hiding under a death soldier and covering the face of another, saving his life too. Desmond was caught by a Japanese soldier, but escapes narrowly through a series of underground tunnels dug by the Japanese, where he tends to the wounds of a wounded Japanese soldier in the tunnel. When day breaks, Doss rescues Howell and another wounded soldier, where he escapes death for the second time, where the bullet of a hidden Japanese sniper hits the helmet. He teamed up with Howell and killed the sniper after he uses himself as a bait to lure the sniper to shoot multiple times. They finally escape Hacksaw together under enemy fire, where Sergeant Howell was lowered first, leaving Doss behind. Gunshots can be heard up the ridge, where it seems Doss was likely dead. But in a shocking turn of events, Doss descends with another wounded soldier to safety. As the battle on Okinawa ends and Doss is brought back to safety, Captain Glover and the other soldiers realize the magnitude of Doss's actions. Glover, now deeply impressed by Doss's bravery and the number of lives he saved, begins to acknowledge that Doss's unwavering dedication to his faith and his principles was not a liability, but an asset. He later apologized. Inspired by Desmond's bravery, the soldiers rally and launch a successful assault on the ridge, citing they will not launch the attack without him. Despite the day being Doss's Sabbath day, he joins his fellow soldiers after finishing his prayers before the attack, symbolizing the unity and respect he has earned. With reinforcements, they turn the tide of the battle into their favor. During an ambush set by Japanese soldiers feigning surrender, Doss manages to save Glover and others by knocking away enemy grenades, but was injured in the process. Doss descends the cliff, clutching the Bible Dorothy gave him. After an intense battle, it ends in victory, but not without significant loss. The movie ends with the life of Desmond Doss, who was awarded with the Medal of Honor, America's highest award for courage under fire, and was later revealed that Doss and Dorothy were married until her death in 1991. Desmond Doss died on March 23, 2006, at the age of 87. Subscribe to the channel for more videos. Turn on notifications and leave a like. Thanks for watching.